All right, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Tom Chelini,
Okay. And where were you born?
San Francisco,
And when were you born?
September 5th, 1933.
And how was your childhood in San Francisco?
Fine, I went to a Catholic grammar and high school, graduated,
And what years did you graduate?
1951.
Okay. How could you describe your family life when you were young?
Uh, I was actually raised by my grandmother, my father's mother. She lived with us, or actually, we lived with her. Uh, Both my parents worked, so she more or less raised me.
And where did your parents work?
My father was a teamster. He worked, uh, most steady job was a place called Dreamland Bedding. My mother worked in candy factories, making candy.
And you attended St. Peter's and for school,
St. Peter's Grammar and High School
and then you attended the Santa Rosa Junior College afterwards.
after I was in the service.
What were the first jobs you had while you were growing up?
I worked at Seal Stadium as a vendor and then as a stand porter.
And how long did you work for those for at Seal Stadium?
I was drafted in 1953. Up until then, I had worked from 51. No, actually, I worked before I got out of school, so maybe 4 or 5 years.
And what did you intend on doing for your career after high school?
Well, the Korean War was on. I didn't think I'd have much of a career. Being on the West Coast, most of the guys were being shipped to Korea, and a lot of them weren't coming back. So I really didn't plan too far ahead for my future.
In 1953, you were drafted into the Army. How did this experience in the Army affect you as an individual?
Well, I was a little leery of going. First time away from home, but it turned out not to be so bad.
Had anyone else in your family or close friends served as well before you?
No,
When did you join law enforcement?
August 16th, 1961.
And what or whom encouraged you to join?
I'm sorry.
What or whom encouraged you to join?
I took a civil service exam, believe it or not. I worked at the post office at the time, and wasn't satisfied with that, so I thought I'd try something different.
And was your family supportive of the decision?
Yeah.
What on your resume or interview particularly interested your employer?
I really don't think too many things interested the oral board that interviewed me. Unfortunately, I had to appear for my oral in my postal uniform, and they didn't take too kindly to that. So I didn't score very well on my oral.
Did you have any references that helped you out?
No.
And how did the training process once you were hired as a police officer, how did it compare to the training that you received in the Army?
The training that I received was on the job, and I was fortunate enough to be assigned with deputies that had been there for a while. So they taught me well.
And which deputies trained you?
All of them. Each was given a job. You have to understand what we did. We rotated watches. We worked for 2 weeks days, 2 weeks on the midnight watch, and then 2 weeks on the 4 to 12. So we had different duties on each watch. So I had a lot to learn, and they taught me well.
Do you recall anyone in particular that helped you out?
Oh, definitely. My captain was Mike McDonald. Nickname was Iron Mike. And his top deputy was a Carl Cleary, who was really my mentor.
And did you get to work with him for a long period of time?
I was on the watch with Captain McDonald until they came out with the Jacob Survey, which reorganized all the department. I refer to we only had deputies, captain of the watch, superintendent. The new regime or the new orders came out. They installed sergeants, lieutenants, and chiefs. And that kind of changed everything.
And where were you first stationed once you were hired?
The Old Hall of Justice on Kearny and Washington Street in San Francisco.
And once you began transporting prisoners, where did you travel and how long did you do this for?
Well, I transported prisoners to state prison, Vacaville. That was about 50 miles north. And I transported mentally ill patients to Atascadero. That was about 220 miles south.
Did you once travel to Texas to transport a prisoner?
Yeah, in 1962, I was sent to extradite a person whose probation had been violated and had to be brought back for sentencing.
And what were your duties as a bailiff once you became one?
Well, I had to bring the prisoners to court, maintain their dispositions, bring their dispositions back to the front office so that they could record the dispositions. And later, when I was assigned to juries, I kept them overnight, locked them up in a hotel, and made sure they didn't have any outside contact.
And what was the most memorable escape attempt you witnessed?
Escape attempt I witnessed. We were transporting a prisoner to Atascadero, and we stopped for lunch, and one of the prisoners bolted. We had 3 prisoners at the time. I stayed with the 2. My partner ran after the one who was running and brought him back.
Were there any successful escape attempts during your time?
Not while I was there, not while I was on duty. But yeah, we did have an escape, a day watch escape on a Sunday where 3 prisoners escaped, one of which fell off the rope and broke his leg, so he didn't get too far. The other 2 escaped, but were recaptured within a week. We had another fella that went out and fell off the roof and was killed in the fall. He was found lying. He was actually reported to us by a driver on the freeway who saw his body on top of the coroner's office.
Was it surprising? Was there any public reaction to the escape attempt?
No. It's very unusual. It was we were located on the 7th floor. The escapes that I mentioned were on what they called, one of them was on D block on a visiting day where the prisoners were allowed to walk, and they had pried open the bars, and they were slim enough to get out the window. and they had tied a bunch of sheets together. And as I said, the first two made it, the third one fell. So the others went out through the court tank, and evidently they managed to pry loose a screen and somehow spread the bars and went out. And all they really had to do was open the door to the exit, and they could have walked down the stairs and escaped. They went over the side, and one fella fell.
And were they caught afterwards?
Yeah. Oh, nobody ever escaped that wasn't caught.
And how was it to serve in the city that you grew up in?
I'm sorry.
How was it to serve in the city that you grew up in?
Well, I didn't know any other, except for overseas. That was it for me.
And how did the time in the Army help prepare you or help you in law enforcement?
Well, I did get some good training. I did 16 weeks of heavy weapons infantry training. When I went overseas, they sent me to company clerk school and then the leadership school. And so it all came in handy when I joined the Sheriff's Department.
Throughout your performance reviews that I've gone over from your superiors in the Sheriff's Department, your dedication, leadership, and communication skills are continually highlighted. How did you develop these skills?
You know, I had a philosophy. When I dealt with prisoners, I treated them the way I wanted to be treated. I never had a problem communicating with prisoners until a week before I retired. But they knew where I was coming from, and they never gave me any trouble. So it worked out well for both of us.
And what happened the week before you retired?
A mentally ill prisoner was brought up to the booking counter, and he wasn't reacting to the questions that were being asked. So I went around to try to get him to answer the questions, and he hit me. Only time in my career that I was ever hit by a prisoner.
And what happened after he hit you?
Well, the other deputies came and assisted me, and that was it.
And what impact do you believe your professional conduct had on not only prisoners but also your fellow officers?
Well, I think I never had any trouble with my officers. I never had any, as I stated, no trouble with the prisoners. There were some incidents in the jail. There were food riots. I was once asked by the sheriff to walk down the main aisle while food was being thrown out from the cells, but they didn't hit me. So I take it that they kind of respected me and knew that I was put in a bad position. So,
Did your superior ask you to go out in the middle because he knew that you would be respected?
No, it was the sheriff himself, Matt Carberry, who made me go down because they had cameras set up. And the cameras, I think, were Channel 4, I believe it was Channel 4, a television channel, was filming it. So he wanted to cite the sound bit or whatever. So I was the guy, but they didn't hit me.
Was he surprised that they didn't hit you?
No. If he was, he didn't say.
And when did this food riot happen?
That would have been probably late 71, sometime in 1971.
And the food riot ended after you began to intervene?
Well, that was, when they ran out of food, the riot was over. It was a matter of singling out the ringleaders and dealing with them. But that was it.
And how were you able to deal with the ringleaders?
Snitch.
On November 27th, 1978, you have a correspondence from the undersheriff providing instructions for handling and protecting the new inmate Dan White after he murdered Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk. What were your thoughts when you received this letter?
Well, a lot of the things that were mentioned that we weren't supposed to do, we wouldn't have done anyway. We wouldn't allow. Dan White was housed in a separate section. He wasn't mixed with other prisoners. His friends would try to come up and visit him at night. Other police officers, other friends, and I didn't let him in. At that time, when Dan White was a prisoner, I was back on the watches. I was either a sergeant or just became a lieutenant. And we were instructed with this letter to not let anyone near him, which we wouldn't have done anyway.
And how long did you house Dan White for?
Till he was sentenced. He was probably in our jail. I don't think he was there 6 months. I don't think they waived time, so he probably had a speedy trial.
Were there any major incidents with him during this time?
No, as I said, he was separated from other prisoners.
And how did this test your abilities as a lieutenant?
Not a problem.
Was it challenging to protect Dan White and also handle the media?
No, I didn't handle the media. Not at that time. Later on in my career, but not at that time.
Later on in your career, how did your relationship with the media develop?
Well, I took over when I came back from the FBI Academy. I was reassigned to what was now County Jail Number 1, and I was the jail commander. So the press room would call me for information on different prisoners, and I would talk to them about what I could. I'd tell them.
Do you know any particular journalists that you worked with?
Well, the one I recall right offhand is Baron Muller. He was quite a character, and that was his real name, Baron Muller. But he was a good man. He didn't exaggerate. You know, he believed what I told him and printed what I told him. So.
In a 1979 letter from Pierre Merlet, he states that you were a witness in the recent Examiner trial. What testimony did you provide during the trial?
Which was this now?
From Pierre Merlet, 1979.
Examiner trial. The only trials that I really testified to were we were sued by someone who claimed they tripped over food that was spilled, and I testified in that case. Examiner trial. You know, just total blank to me. I can't even recall Pierre Merlet. The other trials I testified, actually, I testified against Sheriff Hongisto, and he never held that against me. In fact, he was one of my true supporters. Came to visit me when I was in a hospital, brought me study materials, promote for the next upcoming promotion. Really treated me well. And the other trials, I testified I caught a prisoner escaping from when I was assigned to county parole, to work furlough. I caught a prisoner escaping, and I testified against him. This is a total blank. Sorry, I can't remember.
And what testimony did you provide against Sheriff Hungisto?
Well, there was to be a big eviction of the International Hotel right after Sheriff Fungisto became sheriff, and there was a big hue and cry because most of the people that lived there were old and had no place else to go. They wanted that building so that they could tear it down and build another building. Sheriff Augusto, in one of the meetings that he had when he came to the jail to see me, said that he would not evict them if he was ordered to. And somebody reported to somebody that he said that to me, and they subpoenaed me, and I had to testify to it. But he, as I said, he never held that against me. And actually, the undersheriff was on trial too, and they asked me if he said it, and I said no. He never said that. So they convicted Hungisto, and he served 5 days for contempt of court in San Mateo, not in our jail.
Was it challenging to give testimony against one of your superiors who you've come to know?
Yeah, I was, I wasn't looking forward to it, but I had no choice. I had to tell the truth. Whoever told the prosecutor that I heard what he said, I never found out who did that. So, I doubt seriously that I would have volunteered it. But when asked, I couldn't deny it.
Do you believe your testimony displayed to your department that of your conduct, your moral ethics?
Well, I believe so. They couldn't believe that I did testify and thought that would be the end. But as I said, it was only the beginning with Anguisto.
In 1979, the Department of Justice invited you to attend the 120th session of the FBI National Academy. The invitation to this prestigious program made you become only the second person in the history of the San Francisco Sheriff's Department to be selected. What were your thoughts when you received this letter?
Well, they had advised me that it was coming, and the undersheriff at the time was used to be a deputy who served with me, Charlie Smith, and he's the first person that went to the FBI Academy, and he wanted me to be the second, and I wasn't really looking forward to it. I had 2 young children, and it was an 11-week course back in Washington, and he talked me into it, and I don't regret it.
After serving with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department at that point for almost 20 years, could you describe your experience at the Academy and the other officers that you met?
That was probably the greatest experience in the 27 years. I met people from all over. A good friend of mine, or who became a good friend, was from New York, and we worked together through the 11 weeks. Studied together, took the exams together, and I can tell you something strange about him. When we went on the range to fire our weapons, it was snowing most of the time. He never hit the target. He was terrible with a pistol. But as an officer, assigned in New York. He fired his gun 3 times, killed 3 people.
You had spoke to me once about him before, I believe. You had said that he had once cursed after promising never to curse again in order to defend you from one of your bosses at the academy. Could you describe that experience?
You know, he had, I think either his wife or one of his children had a serious problem. I think it was his youngest daughter had a serious problem, and he swore that if she recovered, that he'd never swear again, never use a curse word again. And as I said, we were pretty close, and he saw me arguing with not an officer, but our chaperone, more or less. And he was almost calling me a liar, and my friend stepped in and cussed him out. And you know, then he yelled at the guy I was having trouble with by saying, you made me break a vow. And I thought he was going to hit him, but he didn't.
And what impact did this experience at the academy have on your career?
Actually, aside from the friends that I met, or the people that I met and became friends with, some came to San Francisco and looked me up. And, you know, I gave them a tour. One person in particular wanted to go see the Haight-Ashbury. Another one wanted to go to Muir Woods. And, you know, so I did make some good friends. But as far as the job, it was all really police work that we were instructed in, and I was in custodial work. Kind of 2 different things.
And when you see your 1980 FBI National Academy ring, what does this remind you of?
Good times, good times. I paid for that. I wanted a memento, and so that became my memory.
And during the 1980s, with the onset of the AIDS epidemic, did any of the handling procedures in the jails change due to the outbreak?
No, we, as you know, AIDS, there is no cure for it. And we did have homosexuals in the jail. They were separated, and they were advised by the medical staff what could happen. But we also had a lot of narcotics addicts, and you know, that's another way to contact AIDS, shooting up. And that's how some people did get it. I don't know of any that contracted it while they were with us, but we had a lot of AIDS patients. In those days, early days, they didn't live very long.
And during your time with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, who were the most memorable officers that you served with?
As I mentioned, Mike McDonald, my captain, my first captain, Carl Cleary, nicknamed Bull. He was, like I say, my mentor. He really took me under his wing. Another lieutenant that I learned a lot from was a Frank Hugel, who served in World War II and was in Graves registration. And some of the tales he told were quite frightening, but anyway, I learned a lot from him. And then there was an Irish captain named Jack Scanlon, who was a chip off of his father's block. Tough man, but fair. And he was a disciplinarian, but fair.
And while you were with the sheriff's department, you were married and you had two children. How was it managing being able to be a lieutenant and being able to raise a family?
Well, that became a problem because once I became a lieutenant, I had to go back to the watches. Now, Sheriff Hongisto lengthened the watches from 2 weeks to a month. So I was on a month of midnight to 8 and a month of the 12, of the 4 to 12, and he eliminated the day watch. So I worked nights, either midnights or 4 to 12s for a couple of years. That was tough. Not for me, for my family, because my wife was home alone with the kids.
In your letters from your superiors, they frequently cite that you have a wife and two young children, and they would invite you to certain events for them to attend. Do you believe that as your career as an officer, do you believe that it had any, what impact do you believe that it had on your children?
I think my oldest son didn't appreciate the fact that I was a deputy sheriff, whereas my youngest son, no problem. My oldest boy acted up quite a bit. No trouble at all with my youngest.
And during your 28 or 27-year long career with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, what was the most memorable experience you could describe?
Well, an unforgettable experience was Sheriff Hongisto nominated me for an award. They were giving awards to the police, the fire department, and the sheriff's department. Now, it was a dinner, and the policeman was receiving his award for being involved in a shootout in San Francisco Financial District, where he was wounded, and he wounded a couple other people and killed one. The fireman was being rewarded because he was hung by his feet by fellow firemen to rescue a young child in the bathroom of the second floor. She couldn't jump. The girl he rescued couldn't jump because it was 2 floors down. So they lowered him over the side. He grabbed her by the hands, took her out of the window, and they pulled them both up. And my reward was for organizing the first off-site county, I have to laugh about it, work furlough program. That was my contribution to the cop who got shot, the fireman who hung over the side of the building, and me because I organized work furlough. And I thought I didn't belong there, not with those two people, but that was it.
And when you retired as a lieutenant in 1989, how do you believe that the San Francisco Sheriff's Department had changed during your time with the department?
Well, everything had changed from when I first joined. The watches were larger. They hired more deputies. When I was hired, the seniority list for County Jail number 1 was 24. I was number 24. When they typed my name, it was falling off the paper. It was Thomas Chelini. Yeah, and I fell off the paper. When I was the jail commander of County Jail number 1, I had 90 deputies. Well, 90 personnel. I had lieutenants, sergeants, senior deputies.
And as you gained more seniority with the department, how was it to be able to train younger deputies and personnel and what impact do you believe you had?
Each new hire was placed with a veteran deputy, same as they did with me. And when I had command, I specifically picked the deputies that would teach these young people coming in. And I think on the whole they did a good job. Never had any problems. We installed a camera system in the booking area to eliminate any kind of people claiming that they were roughed up or beaten in any manner. But once we put those cameras in, nobody ever filed a complaint. Up until then, there were complaints filed, and they were investigated and found to be false.
Your career with the San Francisco Sheriff's Department was undoubtedly stressful and challenging. If you were in 1961 again and you had a chance to redo all of this, would you do it again?
Well, yeah, I enjoyed my time in the Sheriff's Department. I never was scared. There were some situations where things were a little hectic, but I was never afraid. I mean, I did my part whenever it was necessary. But yeah, I think I'd do it again. I enjoyed the time. I enjoyed the people I worked with. I hope they learned a lot from me. I was once told at a luncheon that I became a legend in the department. I don't know anything about that, but I took it that that was complimentary anyway, if nothing else.
It gave you gave you satisfaction that you would be remembered in the department.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to include?
No, I don't think. No, it was as a parting gift. When I retired, they knew I was into baseball, so they gave me a trip to Phoenix for spring training, 7 days, tickets to ball games, air flight, hotel, and I think $1,500 to spend as a parting gift.
Thank you for the interview, Grandpa.
You're welcome.